This is a general reading for entertainment purposes only. Watching my content does not constitute an advisory relationship such as therapy or legal counsel. I am not a certified medical or therapeutic professional, and my readings do not constitute professional advice. My readings are for confirmation of what you already intuitively know for yourself, not to get answers from me. General readings like this are like forecasting the weather for the entire planet. I can say that it is summer in the northern hemisphere, but summer looks very different from region to region. So please use your best judgment, take what resonates and leave the rest. And now let's get back to the video. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bee and I am the Moon Lodge Mystic. I'm here to talk about July's lunar cycle through the lens of Vedic Astrology. This is Hindu astrology, basically, is how I tend to explain it to people. We use the sidereal zodiac. So if you're not familiar with the difference between the tropical and sidereal zodiac, I would recommend that you go to my website. I have an Astrology 101 series that goes into detail about this. But basically, the sidereal zodiac and the tropical zodiac, they use the same constellational signs, but they're calculated in the sky differently, and they've been drifting apart from each other over time. And so when I say that something is in a sign in sidereal astrology, it might not be the same sign as what you're hearing from Western and tropical astrologers. So don't be alarmed if it sounds like the signs are incorrect. They're just different. They're just calculated differently. So first I'm going to start with the overall transits during the month of July, or at least this lunar month, which starts July 17th with the new moon. And then I will break down the new moon and the full moon separately and go into a little bit more detail there. So, like I said, this lunar month is July 17th to August 15th. The new moon, which is the start of the lunar cycle, occurs on July 17th, and then the full moon will occur on August 1st. So there's 2 weeks following the full moon where we're still in a lunar month and we're still feeling the effects of that full moon. During this time, the sun is transiting Cancer. It entered Cancer July 16th and it'll be there until August 16th. Actually, this new moon is happening at 0 degrees Cancer, so it's really early in Cancer. Mercury entered Cancer as of July 7th, and it's going to enter Leo July 24th. Venus entered Leo July 6th, and will go retrograde on August 6th, or at least will retrograde back into Cancer. It's going to retrograde from July 22nd to September 3rd. Mars is transiting Leo until August 18th. Jupiter and Rahu are still in Aries, Ketu is still in Libra, and Saturn has been retrograding in Aquarius since June 17th. That's going to last until November 4th. During this time, we have Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn giving their aspects. All planets aspect the sign that they are in, that's a conjunction, and the sign opposite it. But only Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn have additional aspects that they give besides that. So Mars is aspecting Scorpio, Aquarius, Pisces. Jupiter is aspecting Leo, Libra, and Sagittarius. Saturn is aspecting Aries, Leo, and Scorpio from their respective positions in the zodiac. So let's dive in a bit to what this means. So the sun is in Cancer. Cancer is a water sign that's associated with hearth and family. So I want to say hearth because it's the home, but it's really like the heart of the home. It's not just like your house, right? It can be, like often Cancer is associated with real estate and things like that. And the fourth house, which is like our home and real estate and obtaining a home. But it's really about this like feeling of home, where you feel safe, secure, and nourished, where you can feel comfortable being yourself. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and so this is kind of why Cancer gets a reputation for being emotional, being a little bit like the tidal cycles of the moon, low tide, high tide, and it seems a little fickle in a way. That's because the moon moves pretty fast. Like, it takes only 27 or so days to make its full round around the zodiac. It takes all the other planets, like the sun takes a year to do that. Mercury and Venus maybe a little bit less, but for the most part they're kind of hanging around the sun most of the time, so it's about a year. The moon is really, really fast, and so it's changing signs every 2.5 days. That means, like, the moon, your perception, your feeling state and everything, it's shifting and adapting and going through motions like every couple days. So when we have the sun here in Cancer, we start to feel a bit more intuitive. Our feelings, we're more in touch with our feelings during this time. We're more impacted by these lunar transits. I mean, we're already impacted by the fact that, like, everyone has a moon and everyone's connected to the moon, and everyone has a Cancer in their chart. Like, there's a sign, a Cancer sign, and the house that goes with it and everything. But when we have additional planets in the sign of Cancer, then that kind of it keeps, like, adding on to itself. So sun in Cancer, sun usually represents father or like patriarchal figures and leadership and stuff like that. So sun in Cancer really is concerned with being a provider, with providing for their family, with maintaining their familial relationships and making sure that their relatives are feeling good. And really it's like this King of Cups energy where, he's the sun, he's the king, but he's really in touch with his feeling side. He's able to be soft with his loved ones, and he really wants to feel the connection to them. You might also notice becoming interested in your family identity or wanting to explore your ancestry or your heritage and whatnot. That can definitely come up when we have transits going through Cancer. I personally, while this is happening, I'm filming this in very early June because I am planning a trip to Ireland at the beginning of July. So the sun will not have been in Cancer by then, but some of these other planets that are in Cancer are significators for this kind of ancestral voyage that I'm experiencing in my own chart during this time. So yeah. So Mercury is also transiting Cancer, and it's going to move over into Leo July 24th. But while Mercury is in Cancer, our thinking and speech are going to be more influenced by our emotions. It's not necessarily so Mercury tends to rule like Virgo and Gemini. These are very analytical, information-oriented, factually information-oriented. Not so much feeling and intuiting and things like that. Mercury really desires like concrete numbers and facts and things like that. He represents the discriminating intellect, our capacity to measure and account for things and ascribe value to things. So what does that mean when Mercury is in Cancer? It means that we look to our feelings to inform how we are valuing things around us and how we are assessing decisions that we might be making and things like that. This can be a good or a bad thing. There are some times where you really do need to be able to attach from your emotions and make an objective, logical assessment of a situation before going in a direction. Sometimes your feelings are kicked up because of some other issue that's going on in the background, and you're not able to make clear decisions. But really, when that happens, it's kind of like the issue that's happening is creating a disconnect from our center, where we actually know the best answer. But I digress. Basically, this is really great if you're trying to make decisions around things that are impacted by how you will end up feeling about it later. So like if you were trying to choose a career path or a new passion to follow or whatever, this is great. This means that you're like more connected to your emotions and what you actually need from a situation emotionally to feel fulfilled, safe, secure, and like nurtured and everything. When Mercury starts moving to the end of Cancer, that's when Mercury approaches what's called Gandanta. This is going to feel challenging. I'll make a little asterisk that like it's up for debate whether or not Gandanta even applies to Mercury, but I like to point out, I think it's significant to notice it. I think more so we notice it more when the moon is Gandanta, because we're connected more. The moon is our psyche. It's like our total perception of the world. But I think Mercury also represents our mind, and that it can be impacted by the Gandanta point as well. Gandanta means like a spiritual knot. It's always at the end of a water sign crossing over into a fire sign, and it's very challenging. It's like water meets fire. There's a lot of steam, there's boiling water, and it's like burning off. There's phase changes in matter and everything. So it's a huge transformational point in the zodiac, and there tends to come a lot of challenges and difficulties, because that is how we grow. I heard a really nice saying recently, like your comfort zone is a really beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. So if you want to experience growth and you want to transform, it's not going to be comfortable. And that's kind of what Gandanta is. And during that time, things just tend to feel a little bit more difficult. And when we're concerned with Mercury, it's like our thoughts are more focused on our distress, or maybe we have plans and something goes awry and we just feel that frustration more so. And it's really just, it can be incredibly mundane. It can also be catastrophic, but for most people, it's just going to be a regular couple days, July 23rd through July 25th, where Mercury is crossing over this Gandanta point. It's going to just be a regular day, but maybe some things are just more challenging. Like it's just a little crappy in some regard. Like you had to wait 50 minutes at the drive-thru because like the machine broke down or something like that, And how did you deal with it in that moment? This is where like the spiritual growth comes in. It's like you have options for how you choose to deal with those frustrations when they come up, or how you choose to confront challenges in your life. Like, do you have a meltdown? Do you go Karen on the drive-thru guy and be like, how could you let your machine go down like this? Like, that's blah. Or do you go like, well, I'm here and I'm waiting, and that's perfectly fine. That's exactly where I need to be. Maybe I'll just sit and meditate, So it's kind of like that. Once Mercury crosses over into Leo, Venus will already be there. And so when they come together, that's beneficial because Venus and Mercury are friends with each other. So, and they're not necessarily friends with Leo. They don't do it's not that they do bad in Leo. It's not like they're debilitated, but it's not their preferred place to be. And so imagine you're at a party and it's like you don't hate that you're there, but it's not necessarily like your group of friends, and then suddenly your best friend shows up and you're like, oh, thank God. It's kind of like that. So once Mercury crosses over into Leo, that's going to help out Venus a little bit, but also we're going to see a shift. Like, we're shifting from this really soft, nurturing, like wanting to take care of other people and be sweet and kind to other people, going into Leo, where it's like we feel really charismatic, we feel really confident in our speech, and we can be even commanding and want to speak with authority. Leo can also be a little bit dramatic, so when we have Venus and Mercury there, and then Mars is going to be there as well, it's like we might just be a little more susceptible to feeling like a bruised ego, take things a little bit more personally than we have to, and also might become a little too full of ourselves. Just might. It's not necessarily like set in stone that way, but it's just something to be careful of. It's like giving a weather forecast, like, that rain is coming, so pack a raincoat, right? That these transits are going to be happening, and so you're going to be more prone to feeling this way, and just watch out for it and know that it's temporary and that it's going to pass eventually. And use your discernment to figure out whether or not a situation really requires a very assertive, authoritative response, or whether you can soften up a little bit and temper that impulse a little bit. So again, Venus is transiting Leo as well, going retrograde July 22nd, goes back into Cancer August 6th. Venus rules our relationship. All this pile up happening in Leo, it can be troublesome for relationships. And that's because it's like, so say you have a relationship that's going through this transit. Both people are going to feel like some self-importance. And so there's a tendency to not want to yield to other people when you're really soaking up this Leo energy. It's all me, 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 me is the song that everyone's singing when multiple planets are in Leo. And so it's just something, again, to be mindful of. Venus is going to want to take a more commanding role in their relationships, can want to make a show of their affection. The relationship becomes a stage, and they want all eyes on them, right? And so people are just going to be a little bit more self-involved during this time. This can also look like, it can go in a couple directions. It can be people being really, really self-centered and frustrated, like, especially with the Mars influence, like, nah, I said that I wanted flowers and you didn't get me flowers. Why wouldn't you do that? Just like dumb arguments. At the same time, it can look like being very infatuated and wanting to make big displays of that. So, going back to the flowers, maybe it's like, hey, I asked for flowers, like maybe just a small bouquet of flowers. You got me like a truckload of flowers, And so then that's how things still kind of comes around circle to being a little selfish, because it's like, usually when people do that, it's more because they really like the way they come across, how it looks and appears when they make these big displays, more so than the other person's actual interest in receiving such big displays of affection. Again, just something to keep awareness of. Venus is going to retrograde around July 22nd again. And once that happens, we're going to be first of all, Venus is going to become more powerful in the sky, brighter in the sky, but also we're going to be like taking a step back, retracing our steps with our relationships and kind of evaluating things. When Venus goes back into Cancer, I think things will improve a lot, because it's like there might be a big blow up with Mars and Venus and Mercury kind of hanging around in Leo together, especially receiving aspects from Saturn and Jupiter at the same time. And then Venus will go into Cancer and kind of become a bit more grounded in emotion again. So I think things will cool down after August 6th. So like between July 17th and August 6th, so like the later half of July, there might be some reflection that needs to take place. Relationships might be struggling, and then once Venus moves into Cancer, that allows people to kind of cool down a little bit and kind of reconnect with like what's really important in the relationship, because Cancer again is like where we feel comfortable being vulnerable, and whereas Leo is like the opposite. Leo wants to feel invulnerable, wants to feel invincible, because it's like, I'm the king, you know? So it's just a little bit different. Now we're coming over to Mars, and we've talked a lot about Mars, Mercury, Venus, and Leo. Mars in Leo, Mars does very well in Leo, by the way. Very, very powerful in Leo. Powerful for what? Mars is the general. He's usually receiving his orders from the king and carrying out the king's orders. He's in service to the king. Well, when Mars enters Leo, he's like, actually, I'm king. So he really enjoys being powerful, and it's, you know, it can really show as like being hugely capable of pulling off incredible accomplishments and things like that, and being very competitive and being able to dominate competitions and things and really get what you want. It can also look like egomania. It really depends on the individual's chart and everything, but that's just kind of like the spectrum that it can manifest as. Alright. And it's also to be aware, like during this time, you might really want to press go on some ideas, and it's not so much that you shouldn't do that, but just be careful not to be too impulsive. Make sure you're making informed decisions. This is a funky part of the zodiac where like Mars was debilitated in Cancer, comes to Leo and is like, oh hell yeah, I'm making up for lost time here. And then we'll go to Virgo after this. And in Virgo, he's going to be really precise and tactical and everything like that. But it's also like you're getting the check in the mail for all the stuff that you promised to yourself and everybody while Mars was in Leo. So just make sure that you're not over-promising things to yourself or other people, that you're not writing checks that you can't cash. So don't do that. Leo really loves all that big talk, you know? Loves being able to say like, oh god, yeah, I can do this, I can do that, you know, and not necessarily be able to back that up once the money goes down onto the table. Or rather, after the chips fall, I guess. Anyways, side note on Leo. Leo's being pretty activated during this time, not only because there's 3 planets transiting Leo, but the 2 big ones, Saturn and Jupiter, are also aspecting Leo. Saturn is aspecting from Aquarius, his Mula Tricona, which is a fancy way of saying one of his favorite signs to be in, basically. And Saturn has like a huge... Saturn and the Sun have beef. That's just the easiest way to put it. So Saturn represents democracies, right? And Leo is like the monarchy. So Saturn is like the revolutionary that's like, screw you, eat the rich, you know, type of type of stuff. And he's making this direct aspect onto Leo, which is beneficial for Mercury and Venus, but not so much for Mars. Mars is going to feel kind of blocked, stuck, especially during this retrograde. So we're feeling kind of stuck, and when we feel stuck, we feel really frustrated, and we really want to do something about it, and we want to be like, force things to happen, right? And then we also have Jupiter, which is the like opposite of Saturn. Jupiter is very expansive and uplifting and optimistic and idealistic, whereas Saturn is very serious and, you know, he's all about boundaries and limits and stuff like that. Jupiter is making this aspect to Leo. Jupiter is really gassing up Mars, especially because Jupiter is in Aries, and so Jupiter is kind of talking Mars's language right now, because Aries is ruled by Mars. So there's a lot of energy going towards wanting to do things and really feeling motivated and having a lot of courage and ambition at this time, while Saturn is like throwing up roadblocks here and there wherever he can. So it's kind of like ultimately the aspect from Jupiter will help Mars overcome the obstacles, but there's still that frustration of experiencing the obstacles. And again, so we're coming down to Jupiter and Saturn, and I guess I didn't write about K2 and Libra. I feel like I'm repeating myself on these transits a lot, because in every video, like the Saturn, Jupiter, Rahu, and K2, they take years to leave a sign, and so once they enter these signs, it's like we're here for the long haul, and it's like nothing much changes. What changes are the other planets and their positions. So Jupiter with Rahu in Aries still. Jupiter in Aries is very driven to learn and gain knowledge, taking initiative when it comes to making his ideals a reality. Rahu in Aries is very concerned with obtaining what he wants. He's willing to do anything to get it. Jupiter's influence kind of helps Rahu trend more philanthropic and less so criminal. But it's also like, you know, sometimes the road to hell is paved with good intentions kind of situation. So again, that kind of depends on how Jupiter functions in your personal chart, whether he's a functional malefic or whether he's a friend to your chart. Saturn retrograde, we're feeling the pressure even harder than before. Because he's retrograde, he's more powerful, he's really beaten down his energies on our planet right now. So we might be feeling particularly frustrated by obstacles and challenges during a Saturn retrograde. We also are in a phase of like re-evaluating our commitments. Do I want to be committed to this or that? Is this commitment working out for me? What type of commitment comes down to where Aquarius falls in your chart, or actually where like Capricorn and Aquarius both fall in your chart. So, you know, maybe it's a commitment to work, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a commitment to your mom, something like that. The commitments you've made to your family. How are these working out for you right now? Are you feeling dragged down by it? Do you have to let some of these go? Do you have to renegotiate these commitments? Do you have what it takes to weather the storm and stay committed even when the going gets tough? Those types of questions come up while Saturn is retrograde. So now we're coming to the new moon. And we have the chart here. Again, this is the first house, second house, third house, fourth, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. I have articles on my website explaining chart structure, Astrology 101. I will link it in the description. But right now we can see in Cancer at the new moon, Mercury, Moon, and Sun are all in Cancer. Venus and Mars are second from the moon, K2 is 4th, Saturn is 8th, Rahu, Jupiter is 10th. So what does that mean? Well, we have some areas of the chart being emphasized. The 4th, 10th axis, that's like career and home, our reputation. K2 being present here is kind of like you have to let go of something about home, you know, giving up a home. Maybe home is moving away from you. maybe you're just less available to be around your family during this time, because right here it's like emphasizing the career aspect. Like you want to focus on your reputation and growing your career image and stuff like that. The second eighth axis, this deals a lot with how we value ourselves and how other people value us as well. It also deals with like wealth and resources, joint assets, especially in the 8th house, sudden events, vulnerabilities, scandals, and things like that. Again, I can't get too specific because without knowing your specific chart, there's not a lot to really say. But relative to this moon, I feel like, especially when we're in Cancer, it's like we're asking questions about what we need to feel secure. The nakshatra that this moon is occurring in is Punarvasu. This is ruled by Aditi, the universal mother, and again, in the sign of Cancer. Punarvasu represents the return of the light, and that kind of comes from Aditi's nature as this like rhythmic, cyclical goddess. She goes through constant cycles of rebirth. She and her father are constantly like giving birth to each other, and this really has to deal with the rhythms of life and the universe, and knowing that all suffering is temporary, and so is all like pleasure too. But because it's temporary and it's cyclical, we can take solace from the fact that we can depend on the goodness to always return. The light always comes back. Even if it always goes away, it always comes back too. It's kind of interesting that we're having a new moon in this nakshatra following the summer solstice, so the light is decreasing now at this point when the video is coming out. And we have a new moon, which is a dark moon in Punarvasu. So it had me thinking about this cycle of like, we know that the light is decreasing, we kind of know what's happening, but it's okay because it'll come back next year too. Now, I always say new moons are vulnerable moons. A new moon kind of struggles to feel safe, and when you don't feel like safe or secure, you have a tendency to withdraw, to struggle with interacting with the outside world, the external world, and people in your world. The moon, this is happening in Cancer, and the moon owns Cancer, so the moon's pretty strong in Cancer. And in the first degree of Cancer, the sun and the moon are actually occupying the Amsa of Cancer. So when we get into the divisional chart, the D9 here, we see that sun and moon are in Cancer. So what does this mean? This means that these two are Vargotama during this time. That's a term where when a planet occupies the same sign in the Navamsha as it does in the Rashi, the main natal chart, it just makes them doubly powerful. So the moon is actually quite strong during this time, but it's still a new moon, it's still a dark moon. So it's really strong for withdrawing, going inwards, connecting with that source of intuition and feeling and understanding, and kind of doing some reflection work. When the moon is dark, that's when we're most able to access like how are we really feeling here, because we're kind of withdrawing from the world. We're able to just take some respite. Of course, when we're talking about Punarvasu and Aditi, as well as Cancer, Mother is going to be coming up. And Mother always comes up because the moon is always involved, in the lunar cycle, in the lunar month. So, yeah. But I think, again, we're kind of revisiting some of the same themes that came up in the previous lunar cycle, where it's like asking questions like, did I receive enough mothering when I was a child? Am I coming into issues right now that really are kind of echoes from what my experience was like in childhood and my experience of mother in childhood? And in particular, since we are dealing with a DT, this is about cycles. Like, what behavioral patterns keep coming up for you over and over, especially when it comes to your mother or your family of origin. You might also notice yourself feeling really sensitive to other people's needs and really wanting to mother other people, or maybe you really desire to be mothered right now. My advice during this time is to reflect on how you're feeling, what your needs are during this time. Ask yourself, what cycles are you repeating right now, especially when it comes to your behavior and insecurities. And again, it's a good time to ask those kinds of questions because it's going to be easier to uncover the answers. Another thing to note, when the moon is dark like this, there is less light with which to navigate through our perception of events around us. We have the sunlight during the day, but at night it is quite dark. In this way, we are more vulnerable to distorting our perception of our environment or bumping into misunderstandings with other people. This is also partly why it is recommended to use the new moon as an opportunity for meditating and reflecting rather than going out and advancing our aims in the material world. So, managing our expectations of other people. What else is life about? Like, I mean, personally, a lot of my outlook on life always comes back to inner work. So I feel like I can just talk about that over and over again, and I feel like it's almost always relevant because we're always in our environments coming up on challenges because the world's not perfect. And a lot of us struggle to cope with the imperfections of the world. And this is the kind of stuff we have to look at in order to learn how to cope and be able to tolerate the fact that we live in an imperfect world and still be able to maintain our happiness and peace during those things. So that's kind of where the new moon is coming from. Then we come to the full moon. Let me change the chart. So yeah, now we have the full moon here, and you will see that the moon is now in Capricorn. We have the pile up in Leo here, and the sun is still in Cancer, and we still have all this stuff going on. So again, the 2nd, 8th house is still being emphasized, so is the 4th, 10th. A lot of the same houses are still being emphasized, and then now we have the 7th house aspect coming from Sun. So this is happening August 1st, 11:31 a.m. That's Pacific Standard Time. The nakshatra is Shravana, and the deity is Vishnu himself, the great preserver of the universe. The zodiac sign is Capricorn. Shravana is a nakshatra about listening. It's represented by an ear, and it's receptive, and in order to be receptive we have to be a little humble, right? We have to make space to receive something, and it might be something we don't want to hear, especially when we're dealing with Capricorn. Yeah, and with the influence of Vishnu, this is really about like mental clarity. You know, Vishnu is quite mercurial, so very much about the intellect and having a clear mind with which to perceive and receive information. And I want to talk a bit about how we have a full moon, so full moons are great, but the moon is fallen in Capricorn, you know, it's opposite Cancer. So Capricorn is antithetical to the warm and nurturing environment of Cancer. Capricorn does not really value vulnerability, or rather there's a lot of discomfort around it, whereas in Cancer, vulnerability is desired because the environment is safe, right? When you have a warm and loving home, you can feel the joy of being vulnerable with the people around you because you have complete trust in the people around you. And so then it's very joyful and a very wonderful experience to be vulnerable. But when you're in Capricorn, Capricorn is not that type of environment. It's cold, harsh, difficult, you know, and when you're in that type of environment, you don't feel safe being vulnerable. You feel like you have to be on guard, you have to be distanced from your emotions because you don't want to be weak or anything like that. That is why the moon is fallen in Capricorn, and why people with a fallen moon often struggle to have their needs for care and attention met by their mothers. I see a lot of charts from women with moons in Capricorn. Yeah, I guess if I think about it, I haven't seen a man's chart with this aspect yet. But I'll just say blanket. I see a lot of charts with moon in Capricorn, and there's almost always some kind of difficulty with the relationship with the mother. And, you know, sometimes this is emotional neglect, or like a mother that was very invalidating or even emotionally abusive, but not always. Sometimes it's just a mother that was working so damn hard. Like maybe she was a single mother, right? I've actually had that one come up. She was a single mother, and because of that, she had so much responsibility for caring for her children that she just wasn't available to them the way that they needed her to be. And it's just one of those things. Like, it wasn't her fault. She didn't do it out of malice. She was doing it out of how much she loved her children, and yet they still came out of it struggling to feel secure because they weren't able to receive the care and attention that they needed on an emotional level, but maybe their material needs were always taken care of and everything like that. So this type of experience tends to lead to a lot of scarcity mindset and just, again, Saturn and Capricorn. Hello, doggy. My dog has joined me. He is right here. So, anyways, hello. You're so cute. Okay. So this scarcity mindset, when it comes to Saturn, you know, Saturn is the planet of scarcity and austerity and all that. That's kind of where this connection comes from. And this is also why when you have a scarcity mindset, you struggle to let things go. You kind of have that Four of Pentacles experience where you're holding on, and so it blocks things. That's kind of where that comes from when it comes to Capricorn. So what does this mean in terms of this lunar cycle? Well, I think that it can be kind of like transitioning away from being so in touch with our feelings and kind of toughening up a bit. It can be about confronting our work and our responsibilities. It can also mean, you know, having to take responsibility for your contribution to an unpleasant dynamic. We talked about how these transits in Leo going on with like Venus and Mars and stuff like that can easily lead to some misunderstandings or some blow-ups and conflict in relationships. And so once the moon rolls into Capricorn, that's when we have to kind of do our shadow work and be accountable to the dark parts of our personality and how they show up and sabotage us. So, and it can also be about, well, again, when we do shadow work and we're doing like working with healing family karma and stuff like that, I think the full moon is really going to kind of get us to a point of identifying exactly what we need to release in order to evolve out of those repeating patterns that got brought to our attention during the new moon. So just wrapping this up, Moon in Capricorn can also leave us feeling more withdrawn or serious. There goes my dog. wanting to focus on our work more than our loved ones. The time to ourselves can help us reflect, but it can also mean that we're prioritizing our work and goals, which just plain leaves us with little time to connect with others. In that way, it can feel isolating. At the same time, these transits are pretty supportive for getting work done. And, like if you have career goals or something like that, like Mars in Leo, Mercury in Leo, especially if you're trying to advance yourself or improve your position, like you want to go out for a promotion or something like that, or you want to grow your business, that's going to be a good time to do all that. Saturn in Aquarius. Saturn's the dispositor of this moon, so we want to look at Saturn, and again, the moon is happening, moon is right behind Saturn. So again, we're on this 2-8 axis here that's going on, and we're again re-evaluating the way that we value ourselves and others. At the time of the full moon, Venus is actually in the nakshatra of Magha, which deals with our ancestral heritage. So looking at how the past, especially in our relationships, is impacting the present is going to be kind of on the table for this transit. And that is all I have written down for this. I tried to make it short and sweet. My last video was like 2 hours, and I'm trying not to do that again because that was a lot for me to do, and also I'm pretty sure that nobody wants to sit through 2 hours of astrological analysis. I know that I personally wouldn't want to do that, so I hope that I was clear and concise, that you got a lot out of this information. I feel like I kind of just breezed through it, but that's what I'm trying for this video. At the time that this is released, gosh, I don't even know exactly what time I'm going to release it, but usually the second week of July. I will probably be in Ireland, and so I won't be at any fairs, but later in August I will be at the metaphysical markets, the witches market, and in Ocean Shores doing the Miwi fairs, and the information for that is linked in my description. And I would also just encourage you, if you like this content, to check out my lunar readings playlist over here and watch some other videos about some transits that happened recently, or maybe pick a card readings that I did recently. Alright, thank you. Bye-bye.